Last week, we were looking at a bunch of different websites for startups and for more mature companies, but we were talking about what are the best ways for companies to describe what they do. And I can't believe it, but I completely forgot about an amazing mental trick for thinking about this. And it's based on a Seinfeld episode. Have you seen the Moviefone episode?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I actually was thinking about this when we were talking about it last week. I felt like I had probably gone on enough tangents, so I resisted. However, it is very good. It is very good.
Yeah, we deferred that tangent to this episode. Lucky for you, listener, watcher. So there's this episode of Seinfeld, and I haven't seen it in a long time. I probably should have looked up the synopsis, but from what I remember, somehow Kramer's phone number ends up being the same as the movie phone number, or it's like off by one digit or something like that.
Yes. And it probably, for everyone who's under, I don't know what age, explain what Moviefone is.
That's a really good point.
Because before the internet, and even maybe early days of the internet, before the internet was like, you could just get everything easily. If you wanted to see a movie, and also this is before streaming, so if you want to see a movie, you have to go to the theater. And if you wanted to find out what was playing and when, you could call this phone number and get all of the movie play times at the theater that you wanted to go to.
So it was like more convenient than looking in the newspaper. You would type in, you would punch in like press 1 for this theater, and then it would tell you like these are the show times at this theater.
Or maybe even you might even be able to type in the name of the movie and find out where it was playing.
Yeah.
Because I think that's part of the joke is Kramer trying to, basically his line is crossed at the Moviefone line, so he's getting these calls. He's trying to interpret the beeps so that he can answer. He can give the person an answer.
Yeah, so first he decides he's trying to be the Moviefone operator. And
he's got like the newspapers, so he can rifle through and try to find the listings.
Like, enter the name of the movie or press 2 for like this theater.
He's doing the voice like it's a little pre-recorded. Hello, you've reached Moviefone.
And of course, he can't decipher what the beeps mean because a machine can figure out what they are, but like to a human, they all sound the same. So eventually, he just goes, "Why don't you just tell me what movie you'd like to see?"
Oh man!
As with every Seinfeld episode, the actual show is much funnier than the retelling of. But we used to use this as like a parable with startups a long time ago. Why don't you just tell me what the product is? Why don't you just tell me what the company does on the homepage instead of like going around in circles trying to sound clever and smart?
But it really feels like that sometimes. Often you're looking at the marketing for a new thing, and it's like they're sending you beeps,
Yeah, totally.
Why don't you just tell me what it is?
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's also very hard when you're in the thing to know what's a beep and what's telling the person what it is.
The other crazy thing is that we used to do with telephones is you could call and get the time and the temperature. Did you ever use this when you were a kid?
I didn't, but I was aware that it existed because I feel like it was a thing that would show up in TV shows sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, you could call and get the time. That's what a wild world that was.
Yeah, like what if your clock was off? Like you had a clock in your kitchen wall and the battery died, and you're like, "Whoa, what time is it? I don't know." Like. You could call I don't know what the number was. I'm sure there was a special number you would call, and it would just tell you the time, and I remember it having the temperature too. Like
yeah.
Anyway, so concludes History Hour, Telephone History Hour.
Back to the present day.
I'm going to keep talking about good writing. How to describe what you do. Why don't you just tell me what your company does? Whether it's a homepage, a sales deck, an email, whatever. So yeah, should we get into it?
Let's get into it. Yeah.
This is Jake and Jay-Z. This is Jake and Jay-Z.
You're listening to Jake and Jay-Z, the weekly podcast about startups, design, marketing, strategy, and more.
I'm John Zaratsky, the co-founder and general partner of Character Capital, and I'm here with my co-founder, co-author, co-host, collaborator. I'll have to think of some other co's that you can be someday, Jake Knapp. And you can read, listen, and learn more if you're so interested at jakeandjz.com.
Last week, we talked about startups and new products and how they might be explained using a framework that John calls what, why, how. I'm getting much better at remembering the sequencing of those. It is what, why, how. And we alluded to the idea of going into the Wayback Machine and finding out how startups who are successful today, companies who have grown and found their target customer, were successfully able to communicate what they were doing to their customers, how they did it in the early days, maybe at different phases along the way. Because a lot of times if you're doing a new thing, whether that's at a startup or you're in a larger company or whatever kind of project you're doing, and you're trying to explain it to people, if you do have the idea, and it's a good idea to say, hey, I want to look at how some other folks have done this, who've done a good job of explaining what they do. And we often tend to go to the same places. We'll often tend to go to like, well, how's Apple explain what they do? How do you know, for a product? How do they market a product? We know
super successful companies that are really good at marketing. They're really good at writing, explaining their products. Like, oh, absolutely, we should learn from them. We should follow.
There absolutely are lessons there, but the challenge is if you're doing something new, if you're just getting started, if the product is brand new and nobody's heard of it before, nobody's heard of your company, nobody knows what this thing is, you're playing a different game than Apple is playing today. You're not explaining something to people who've never heard of it, who aren't interested, who don't want to pay attention because it's just using up brain calories that they'd rather spend on something else. And so to find out how that really has worked for people when it was a hard thing to explain, when it was brand new and they didn't have that brand, they didn't have that relationship, didn't have that familiarity, you have to go back in time.
Yeah. Thankfully, we have the Wayback Machine. Archive.org has created this wonderful tool that you can type any URL into and see what that website looked like over time. And we think this is a really helpful technique. We do this a lot when we're running sprints with companies and we're doing lightning demos, which are kind of these quick demonstrations of an interesting website or company or product that we think we can learn something from. And so imagine instead of looking at Apple today, imagine you could look at what Apple was doing in the 80s, you know, when they introduced the Mac for the first time. And you can learn from that. You can learn from them when they're at a point that's maybe a little closer to where you are as a company versus like, you know, the Apple of today, which, you know, wonderful in many ways, but playing a different game, like Jake said, than a startup. So
it's remarkable that someone had the foresight set up to start archiving everything. Because it goes back into the 90s. You can go way back to see things. And I'm just thinking like, who had the foresight? It's amazing.
Archive.org and Wikipedia. I mean, amazing public services that you almost can't believe exist. They're like so good.
Well, since I used to work on Microsoft Encarta, a competitive encyclopedia,
yeah,
I have less fond feelings about Wikipedia than most people.
Yeah, but you probably still use it all the time.
I still do. Yeah. It's unavoidable. Can you not drink water? Can you not breathe air? You have to use Wikipedia.
One of my favorite ways to use this is to look at companies that now do a lot of things and look back at when they only did one thing, or like when they started out, how did they talk about that one thing?
Yeah.
And kind of an interesting example of this is Uber. You know, Uber, super successful. They do a lot. They have rides. They have food delivery. You can get groceries on Uber now. You can send, like if you have a small package you need to deliver, you know, across town, Uber can take it. They have a lot of stuff. You can rent cars through Uber, I think. I mean, every time I open the Uber app, there's a new promotion for some new service. And interesting to look back at in the Wayback Machine, to look at Uber's website when they first started. So I'll just show this real quick.
See what it looked like.
This
Wow.
is in 2011. Look at how specific this is. Like, and if you're listening on audio, like we're on the Uber homepage from 2011. There's a picture of a black car, like a sedan.
It's a Lincoln Town
Yeah,
Car.
that's exactly right. It's the Lincoln Town Car, the
You
classic.
rarely see these around anymore, but
Yeah.
those are the most comfortable cars to ride in the backseat of, by the way.
Yeah.
That's unsurpassed.
And it doesn't say, what this website does not say is like an innovative platform for transportation in cities around the world, right? It doesn't
see the word platform anywhere.
Yeah. It just says everyone's private driver. Sign up now. And then below that, it says request from anywhere, request a car with any mobile phone, ride with style and convenience. Within minutes, a professional driver in a sleek black car will arrive. Hassle-free payment, automatically charged to your credit card on file. Tip included. It's so specific. It's not surprising that Uber had such clear product market fit, that what they were offering in the early days clicked so readily with people because it was so specific. It was so clear.
Look at the what, why, how here. What it is, everyone's private driver. Why, request from anywhere, ride with style and convenience, hassle-free payment. This was a big deal in 2011 if you were trying to get around and you're visiting a city and you had to take taxis. And at the time, taxis were like, I just remember, man, it was always like, do I have enough cash? Because they often wouldn't take a credit card.
Yeah.
So it was like hassle. You expected a hassle when you had to pay. Ride with style and convenience. This was sort of like a luxury offering, the way they positioned it at first. And requesting from anywhere. I mean, you'd have to figure out how to, do I go find a taxi stand, or am I like calling and I need to know the address and then I need to wait there. And I don't know how long I'm going to be waiting for the taxi to show up. And so I remember the first time I used Uber. Do you remember the first time you used it?
I don't think I do. I mean, I remember the general period, like in San Francisco and using it.
Yeah.
Actually, one thing I will say that I do remember is that Michelle and I used Uber like when it first came out, when it was just the black car, and we liked it so much that we used it so much that we made in 2011 going into 2012, we made a New Year's resolution half-heartedly that we should take Uber less because it was like expensive, right? It was like,
what year was that?
It was like 2011 into 2012. So it was probably
that's pretty good. That is, that's an early.
But then in like January of 2012, they introduced UberX, which was like a third of the price. And we were like, oh, never mind. They got us. Like, it turns out we're not the only people having this sensation.
Well, it was terrific and very magical. So they had that going for them. And of course that was all like, you get in the whole like big topic of a lot of that was sort of underwritten by VC money. So they were able to make it cheaper than it would otherwise have been, and blah, blah, blah. Uber is a long saga, but the what, why, how here is terrific. It's very clear, and it is a different game than they're playing today.
Yep.
And really shows a clarity of thought and a through line from what the service is to how we're going to talk about the service and sell it to people. And then clear values that people can then recommend to other people. So that's the golden star for differentiation for me.
Yeah. Yeah. We were actually just talking with a portfolio company yesterday, and they're in Character Labs right now, and their vision for the company is broad. They, without giving too much away, they have an idea for an AI tool that could be useful to business owners, but in a bunch of different applications. It's sort of a platform, literally a platform of different solutions that the customer could get access to. And, so it's like they're trying to start with like the Uber of 2024.
Yeah.
And we had a great call with them yesterday because we get on the call and they're in the Character Lab. So they've now run 2 design sprints and a foundation sprint, and they're running another design sprint this week.
Quick reminder to our listeners, if you are in Character Labs, is a program that we run at Character Capital and it's super early stage startups who founding teams are just getting going. And we work together in basically across 4 weeks, running a sequence of sprints, including 3 design sprints in a row, which is the part that these teams are in now, is the design sprints. So they're learning a ton every week. A lot of some green, lots of red on their scorecards at the end of each week for the key questions and risks they're trying to assess.
Yeah, and it was great because they've had some green, some red. They've been learning things, getting useful reactions from their customers. But it's what they're offering, which again is this sort of platform, this AI platform for business owners. It's not really clicking, right? It's not really working for people. But they picked up on the fact that a lot of the customers that they've talked to, that they've tested prototypes with, they really want help from AI with one specific application, like running one specific part of their business related to marketing. And so we had this great call with the team yesterday where they're like, we've been hearing this from our customers and we're thinking of just focusing on creating a great AI tool for marketing. Like, what do you think about that? And we were like, that's amazing. You should do that. Like you're trying to build Uber 2024 today. You should go back and build Uber 2011 and like nail one thing, make it so good that people are making New Year's resolutions to spend less money on it because it's just too good. And then build from there and build from there and build from there. So we didn't even have to like give them that advice. They like learned that themselves, which was great. But a good example of why it's so important to start specific and make sure that you're solving one problem, any problem, some problem for your customers before you branch out and try to solve a bunch of problems.
Well, it's hard to understand any one problem well enough to figure out how to do the what, why, how of it. Like looking back at this Uber page, and I look at it and I think, oh yeah, this all seems so familiar. I remember that feeling of the difficulties with taxis at that time. And yet it took a great deal of insight to pinpoint these are the things that make this experience bad. And there's an opportunity to change it here. I have an idea for how to change it, but to recognize that and to be able to call those things out, even when they're obvious. I mean, it's like, or what makes Seinfeld funny is it's a recognition of things that are obvious to all of us once they're highlighted on, like, oh yeah, that is an obvious thing. And boy, that is silly. How silly that's basically what a startup is, new product is. It's recognizing something that's just right in front of everyone or right in front of a large enough group of people that you have a market and being like, oh, look, like this is stupid. This is absurd. And here's a way to sort of fix it. And so instead of a joke, you have a product at the end.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
Okay, so up next, let's take a look at the iPhone and actually illustrate what we're talking about with playing a different game, today than when the product was first introduced. So if we start off and we look at the iPhone page as it is today, we've got, iPhone designed to be loved. It doesn't tell you what the thing is at all. Right. Because we all know what an iPhone is. If you don't know what an iPhone is, they're not worried about that as a customer. They're trying to get you to buy your 13th iPhone. Right. So that's the game they're playing here. They're probably trying to convince you to buy something you really don't need. We all probably have a functional phone already. So get to know iPhone. They get into talking about the cameras, the chips, the battery. And there is some what and why here. It's talking about what it is and why, but clearly the burden is not on Apple today to explain what the iPhone is to you in the same way that it was on a startup who's coming out with a new product today. But it's very interesting to go back and look at the very first iPhone page. So if we go way, way back in time and see when it first appears, and it'll be in early 2007. If you haven't seen the video of Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone, his classic presentation. Look, here's the 404 page for the iPhone. So this must be just before. They've got the folder ready. They've got this directory ready, but they haven't put the page there yet. This would probably send Mac rumors into a frenzy. Okay, here we go. Here's
now we're in February.
Now we're in February. So this is after the announcement. And anyway, famously in the presentation, Steve Jobs says, today we're introducing 3 devices, and he talks about the 3 devices, and this page is reinforcing that message. So the iPhone is 3 devices in one. And that's what it says here. Introducing iPhone. There's a picture of a hand holding the iPhone. And then it says, iPhone combines 3 products: a revolutionary mobile phone, a widescreen iPod with touch controls, and a breakthrough internet communications device with desktop class email, web browsing, maps, and searching into one small and lightweight handheld device. It's amazing how much text there is here. We're less than halfway through this paragraph of text. Like this is quite
That was
interesting.
one
Also, just
sentence.
to see.
Everything you said so far was one sentence.
That was one sentence. That was one sentence.
Very bold M dash use. I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of the M dash.
But there's a lot in between those 2 M dashes.
Yeah. I fell in love with the M dash during my newspaper days, and this one really delivers.
To continue, iPhone also introduces an entirely new user interface based on a large multi-touch display and pioneering new software, letting you control everything with just your fingers. So it ushers in an era of software power and sophistication never before seen in a mobile device, completely redefining what you can do on a mobile phone. All of those things are true. It is bananas that there's that much text like above the fold. I mean, if you just think about any Apple page today,
it's pretty small text too.
Small text.
Yeah.
I don't like. It's a well-designed page. It's attractive. But
it's like, what size is it? Let me see here. It's 12 point. It's 12-point text. It's like tiny.
Okay. Yeah, it's super tiny. But there is a what, why, how going on here. What is it? It's sort of 3 devices in one. And why? This is an entirely new user interface. It's enabling a new era. I mean, it's actually kind of funny that in this, above the fold on the marketing page, and it's talking about ushering in a new era of software, which it totally did. I mean, how often does somebody make this bold of a claim and it comes true? But then there's the list of below this. Sort of, I think that if you're not reading, and we know most people won't read that much text, that's why most websites don't have that much text. It says widescreen iPod, revolutionary phone, breakthrough internet device, high technology with an icon of like a wand or something, or a laser.
And you can click into each of those.
And you can click into each of those, and they each have like a big colorful V1 iPhone sort of style icon next to it, lickable, 3-dimensional icon, but pretty interesting to see. I thought this is just like a world in which people don't know what an iPhone is. They don't know what a smartphone that has the entire thing as a screen, and you touch the whole, like it's all new. And so they were really, really thoughtful and careful about how they explained what it was. And I really like painstaking about like, look, this is what this thing is. And they relied on a lot of text. And I mean, most people probably had heard about it in the news. They were super fans. I think the early adopters of the iPhone, folks like you, waited in line for it, right? Like, you were a big Apple fan, right? So like most people who bought one were just big Apple fans, but still fascinating.
Yeah. The other thing I remember about when the iPhone came out was there was this long period between when it was announced and when you could buy it. So this web page is from February of 2007, and I know it was in the summer because I remember waiting in line to buy the iPhone. It was warm out in Chicago. Do you remember what month it was when it came out?
I don't remember.
Okay, but so let's say even if it was July, that's still 5 months, a minimum of 5 months. So you had this huge period of time when people were really interested in the iPhone, but you couldn't buy it. You couldn't pre-order it. Like this page does not have like a pre-order now, like reserve your iPhone button. It's just information. And one thing I remember very vividly was they used that time to do essentially like an ad campaign. But the ads were like, and I should try to find some of these. They were what, why, how. They were not the iPhone ads of today that are all about like how beautiful the design is or showing like these cool uses of it in real life. It was like, here's how you browse the web on the iPhone. And it like showed a person like interacting with it. And they made a bunch of these videos. They were videos you could watch on their website, and some of them were ads too. And this was really important because they had to teach the world how to use the iPhone. They had to teach the world what it was and how you interacted with it and what it actually looked like to use your fingers and tap and pinch and zoom and do all those things, so that when the product came out, everybody knew what it was. They knew how to use it. And I think that aspect of the launch of the iPhone is often overlooked because we just think about this moment of the introduction and the sensation and how popular it was, and we forget that Apple had to teach the world how to use a totally new paradigm for interacting with computers.
A real hallmark of how old this is that on the screenshot, the carrier is singular.
That's like three AT&Ts ago.
Yeah. Now, so what should we look at next?
So, all right. So what I've pulled up here is Slack from 2014, 15, 16, and 17.
Okay. So one a year.
Yeah. And we probably worked with Slack around, it was probably 2014 or 15, right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So GV invested, and this was at the point where Slack had seen really good adoption from other tech companies, software teams who sort of intuitively understood what a chat room was. They had used chat rooms. They could see why it would be useful at work. A lot of people, like 500,000 companies had signed up for Slack pretty quickly. And around the time that GV invested, the next chapter of the company was to really tell the rest of the world about Slack, the rest of the professional world, and explain to people why they should use it if they work in a law firm or in a consulting company or in an accounting office or whatever. And so, part of the challenge was like, how do you explain this product to somebody who maybe has never used a chat room? They don't have the experience of using this type of product. Anyway, let's start with 2014. What do you think of this homepage, Jake?
Well, not the most helpful headline in terms of what it says. Be less busy.
Yeah,
there is a very nice vibe here. So you've got a person with their feet up on a desk. The desk is made out of planks of rough wood.
Yeah.
You can see that there's a Mac computer on top of that desk, but the whole vibe is like very chill. And it says, be less busy. Then below that, the text is relax. Your team's communication problems? We've got that. Slack brings all your communication together in one place. It's real-time messaging, archiving, and search for modern teams.
Yeah.
The lead is very buried here, although the lead, I guess, is actually how you feel with Slack, that Slack is going to actually change the feel of work. And I imagine that because this is from the era of word of mouth in tech companies, that the vibe may be what they needed here to sell it. Maybe that's sort of why. So they're kind of leading with why.
Yeah.
And then getting a little bit into what it is, a little bit by saying it's real-time messaging, archiving, and search for modern teams. And that's the last sentence you get before they say, hey, give us your email address and your company name and sign up for free. So they're leaning in for the kiss very early here. And I think the presumption is you heard about this from somebody already. And yep, it is just as chill and cool as he thought it was. That's the big message of the hero image at the top. So just go ahead and sign up.
It's pretty crazy though. So below that, there's a section that says, learn what Slack can do for you, take the tour. But they don't show the tour. They don't show the screenshots video on the homepage. You have to like click through. And then below there's like a testimonial, which is like, it's a cool testimonial. Somebody saying, I'm basically in love with Slack. It took us less than 24 hours to get everybody on board. Good quote, but still doesn't tell you what it is. Then below that, Slackworks, the services your team already uses, see our full list of integrations. Still doesn't tell you what it is. You can't see what it is. So very interesting, very bold.
Very interesting.
Did not follow our advice.
This was, at that time, and maybe it still is, this was the fastest growing business app of all time, right?
Right.
So this website achieved that the best B2B product like of all time of early growth, the best. This is how they did it. And obviously like a huge part of that was the product itself.
Yeah.
And people just recommending it to other people. That's the engine behind all of this.
Totally.
But this part is important. The marketing is important, even with the best product possible. And they may have been spot on here that what they needed to do was to tell these folks, these like super tech enthusiast folks who are adopting it, hey, the thing you hate the most is being busy and stressed out. This is chill. We just have a different take on it. And that's interesting. They're
Yeah.
breaking the mold in terms of the marketing and positioning.
Yeah. And I think important to consider this web page in the context of those other things you were just saying, like word of mouth, like people, hearing about this from other companies, getting invited maybe to sign up for it from a coworker. Because, nobody wakes up in the morning and like all of a sudden is looking at a website for Slack. These examples, they are a step in a journey. And there's something that comes before and there's something that comes after. And depending on what those things are, the website itself may not be the most important part, right? Maybe Slack was so successful despite this website. Or maybe this website did just enough that when somebody came into it with a really strong recommendation from a colleague, maybe the website did just enough to get them over that hump into, yep, I'm going to put in my email address, my company name, I'm going to sign up and try it. So it's super important. As much as we like to talk about, what does this website do and say, and how good is it? It's really important to zoom out and think about the broader context of how people are learning about your product. They're understanding your product. They're building trust in it. They're trying it. They're starting to use it in their day-to-day lives.
This was intentional and probably was working. And part of the reason you'd think that it's true is because the founder, Stuart Butterfield, had previously founded Flickr. He had figured out how to explain products to people before. This probably wasn't just luck on top of a really good product. This is probably a very good plan.
Yeah.
Well, let's see how it evolves. Should we go forward in time a year?
So that was 2014. So let's look at 2015.
Okay. So 2015. Now we've got blurry image of an office with a video on top of it. There's a small image that's crisp of a person sitting at a computer, and the headline says, in quotes, "So yeah, we tried Slack, ... And then underneath the video, it says, "The sandwich video team tried Slack. Turns out it really did change the way they communicate." And so again, here, like the whole thing they're going for is the vibe.
Yeah.
And also this feeling that it's different, it's chill. It's the why. They're leading with the why of the product. I remember that video, and I don't think we should play the video in the podcast, but it's a great video. And I imagine if people search for sandwich Slack video on YouTube, you'd probably be able to find it. Sandwich is a company that makes terrific advertising videos for startups. My personal favorite is Notarize. So you should also, I guess you could just look for Sandwich as their website and find a whole archive of their stuff. But they're really putting a lot of weight on that, people watching that video. So again, I think, what do you think is going on here, John?
I don't know. I mean, when I pulled these up before we started chatting today, what struck me was just at how bad they all seem on these homepages. And like, I agree with you that like this was working and there was a plan and there was a strategy. And the fact that it stayed kind of basically the same from 2014 to 2015, which was a period of incredible growth for the company, makes me think that it must have been working really well. I think it's helpful to look at these because it doesn't strictly follow like our advice or like conventional advice about what you should do when you're explaining a product. So kind of interesting. I think your theory is right. I think you're probably coming to this because you've heard about it already. And the job of the website is not to completely explain Slack and convince you to do it. It's to just get you over that hump from, okay, I'm already here. Like, oh, okay, cool. Like this feels about right. The sandwich video team, like I've heard of sandwich video. They make cool videos. They make funny videos. And then right below it says Slack is a messaging app for teams, everything in one place, instantly searchable, free for as long as you want with an unlimited number of people. Try it now. So again, really focused on driving people to just try it.
Yeah, you've come here and you not only have heard about Slack and heard that it's great, you probably heard that it's cool at this point, right? Like it was a very cool product. And I think most people like kind of once they sort of had the sense that it existed, again, if you're in the tech industry, because this is where it's spreading at this time, you kind of want to use it already. Similar to how when we look at the iPhone website today and we say like they're playing a different game than a startup, Slack was actually playing a different game than 99.999% of other startups because of Stuart's reputation, because the product was so good. And the audience for whom it was compelling knew about all of this sort of startup insidery stuff that also made Slack cool. It was just like the cool kids. And so the idea that we're going to get you to watch this video that, like, I think about the advice that I would give to a company today who's making a product page. They're trying to explain what their thing is it, if you're going to have a video, it should really show what the thing does. And it should probably play without audio so people can, get the sense as quickly as possible, like what's going on, because people's attention span is so short. And this one really assumes you're ready to sit down and watch what I recall is probably like a 2+ minute video. It's like a mini documentary of this team using Slack. It's a different game. They're definitely playing a different game.
Should we look at 2016?
Yeah.
So we looked at 2014. Okay, so 2014 is Be Less Busy. 2015, we tried Slack. 2016,
we have a picture of Mars. We have the Mars robot. Like, what was the first one?
You mean the name of the rover?
Yeah.
Mars Curiosity.
Curiosity. So Curiosity rover is in the foreground. Over the top of it, a headline, a messaging app for teams who put robots on Mars, and robots in Mars are underlined. The team behind the Mars Curiosity rover, I could have just read, and it says right there, the team behind the Mars Curiosity rover is one of tens of thousands of teams around the world using Slack to make their working lives simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. And then email address, create new team. Like big.
Isn't this crazy though? Like, it's basically the same homepage from 2014 to 2015 to 2016. While the company has raised, probably $100 million, they've grown from like 500,000 to 5 million. I'm just sort of making these numbers up, but like incredible growth. It's basically the same homepage. It's basically, you already know about Slack. You heard something about Slack. The homepage is all about like, you should join the club. You should get on board with like this new way of thinking about work. Give it a shot. Like, start now. You scroll down the page, that's the whole page. Like,
this time you can't scroll down and find out anything else.
There's nothing else on the page. This is the whole homepage. It's really amazing. They do have a separate page for like product, which like has a detailed walkthrough of the features. And that was something we worked on a lot in the design sprint, was like a tour of the product. But the homepage is all about just saying, hey, you can be like the team behind the Mars Curiosity rover. Like, you may not think of yourself as like a tech company, but like cool people are using Slack and you should use it too.
It's remarkable in looking at this, thinking about how much they invested in brand. And in this sense, the investment is actually the attention that they had, right? They had money they were raising, but one form of capital that you have is the attention that you get, and you can choose how to spend it. Yeah. And the conventional wisdom is you should spend most of that attention on just explaining what the thing is to make sure that people won't miss out because you don't have a big budget of attention. And I think Slack sort of rightly so figured out that we've got a pretty big budget of attention. People are actually paying quite a bit of attention to us.
Yeah.
And then they decided we're going to spend as much of that attention as we can on the vibe, on the brand, on the sense that this is different, this is cool, this feels better. And so I kind of think in looking at these that if I imagine the perfect crystal clear marketing page version of this, where it's just like nicely designed, very clear cut, like here's what the product is, here's what the product is, here's what the product is, that Slack probably feels a little more boring at this point to people than it did. Like, I think that this sort of atmospheric, like get people really excited about it even before we show them anymore. I think it's a very interesting intentional choice that I don't think most people can get away with because they don't have that much attention budget coming in. You don't have people constantly pouring in, willing to spend time. But if you think you can make it work, pretty powerful, work pretty well for them.
Yeah. And again, just the importance of knowing where the homepage sits, where the sales deck sits, the email, the white paper, whatever you're writing that you're trying to use to explain what the product is and why people should try it. Like, you have to understand where that sits in the broader experience of your customer, because you might be like Slack and you might have this incredible amount of attention and people curious about your product, but you might not. You might have to kind of reach out to people and grab them and shake them a little bit and say, hey, like we exist and we are different than what you know and you use today. And that's a very different website, has to do a very different job. The email you send them has to do a very different job than Slack had to do at this time.
Yeah, that's right. Well, what do you have?
That was 2014, 15, 16. And then I have 2017 too, just because it finally in 2017, it finally changes.
It finally looks more like you'd expect the marketing page to look. Well, a little bit more.
And it's this, I mostly just was sort of puzzled by this one because
actually, yeah, it doesn't, at first blush, I was like, oh, this is going to be a typical marketing page, largely just because the background's mostly blank. There's a bunch of like illustrations. It says, the headline says where work happens, which feels a little bit more like they're kind of finally describing what the thing is.
Right.
But there's an asterisk where work asterisk happens, and then the asterisk defined below whatever work means for you. Slack brings all the pieces and people you need together so you can actually get things done. A pretty decent, decent what there, and a bit of why, like, so you can actually get things done. But then that's it. You scroll down and there was nothing more to this page. They just say, give us your email address and get started. It's very counter, again, to the conventional wisdom of let people scroll down and, if they need to learn more, let them learn more. Here, you'd have to click product if you wanted to find out more. So I assume that had to have been an intentional decision throughout the years to not scroll down, because probably most people were coming in via referral and just needed some kind of a little bump to go ahead and sign up. And that has to be part of this thesis here for marketing in this way.
Yeah. I was also, when I was looking through the Wayback Machine for Slack, I was looking at how long slack.com has been an active domain. The first capture of slack.com by the Wayback Machine is in 1999. So this is been I mean, obviously Slack, the company, didn't exist then, but the domain has been online for a long time. So I started poking around at some of the old versions, and I found this one.
David's webpage.
In 2013, David DiGiacomo owned slack.com. You could just imagine this is just like in the early days of the web. You're like, what's a cool domain name? I know, slack.com. He buys this. He turns it into a personal webpage. Literally has Times New Roman on the top. It has like a goofy photo of him with like
a great photo of
I don't
him.
even know how to describe what's going on here. These are like
it's a thing that I feel like I've seen before, and I can't recall what it's like. These three dogs, and they're wearing like chef's hats, and it says DD. Maybe a listener can tell us what that is. You probably instantly recognize it.
Underneath
at the bottom, it says cat photos.
Yeah, that's great. So first, so it's like, there's three links or four links underneath: cat photos, test equipment and electronics information, credit card fraud, and free software
for Unix.
And all these just link to like cats.html. It's like the name of the web page for the cat photos. So anyway, props to you, Sir David DiGiacomo, wherever you are.
Actually, this was in a way the clearest version of Slack.com. You definitely know with 100% clarity what's going on with David's webpage. Wow, that's pretty good. I think that's going to be tough to top. So cool. So we look back at Slack, we look back at the iPhone, we look back at Uber. These are all super successful products, obviously, over time. And we got the chance to see what they looked like in their earliest incarnations in terms of marketing and how they explained what they were, and whether or not they followed the what, why, how framework. It's interesting to see how different companies are playing different games at different times. I think Uber was the clearest example of what, why, how, and kind of the straightforward Moviefone. Why don't you just tell me what it is? They really did that. Actually, the iPhone did as well. That was also very clear. Slack, less clear, but definitely interesting to see how that worked, or try to guess what was going on behind the scenes there and making that work. So super cool. I think that's a good place for us to wrap.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for the listener?
Yeah, I have two. I have one sort of serious one and one fun one. We'll start with the serious one. This is like a weird thing to recommend, but it's actually a LinkedIn post from one of our founders. Don't often recommend LinkedIn posts, but this one is
Especially
by
recommending LinkedIn posts verbally.
right. Yeah.
That's just
Yes.
definitely.
Now in the next episode of Jay-Z's Poetry Hour, I will read you this LinkedIn post. We'll include we'll include the link, but I'll just screen share just so you can kind of get a sense of it. And this is from Vishal Bayatnal, who's the founder of Extend, which is a character portfolio company. And basically the post is that he says one of the most valuable things we ever did was selling the product via cold outbound before writing a single line of code, and closed a 6-figure ARR deal as our first customer in the process. So I just really like this because I think that I just think it's such good advice. And I think that a lot of people talk about doing things like this, but I know from investing in Kushal at that time and from talking with him, I know that he walked the walk. Like, this was actually how he operated the company in the early days. You know, he showed us, like when he would go into a customer meeting, he would go in with like a high fidelity clickable prototype of the product, like reloaded with that customer's like data, or at least data that seemed like realistic for that customer. And the whole thing was like, it was just a demo. Like, it wasn't real software. Like, it didn't work, but it looked really real. And he learned a ton from those conversations. Of course, it's just like, you know, the prototypes that we help founders create in design sprints. But it was also a really effective way to sell, because he was able to show them this is what it would be like to use the product. Like, he could take them there. He could time travel with them, not into the past, like the Wayback Machine, but into the future, into like, this is the moment when you're using Extend. And it was really powerful. So that's it. I just thought that was I think it's a good technique. I recommend the technique, and I recommend this very brief post and story from Kushal about how to do it.
That's great. The second paragraph is also quite cool. In most startups, with a few exceptions, technology and code is the easy part. People, positioning, framing in the market are always the hardest parts. And before we committed months and years of our time to the idea, we wanted to de-risk it as much as possible.
That's awesome. Well, I thought of another great thing I like about this, which was in the comments. A founder left a comment. He said, "What is the tool you used for cold outbound?" Or would that be in the full story? And Kushal said, "Just Gmail, nothing else needed to run this playbook. People focus too much on setting up infrastructure, et cetera, in the early days. Being hands-on, hitting the ground, getting learnings quickly is the most important thing to optimize for." Again, great advice. But what I really liked about that detail of it was that he played on hard mode from the beginning. So like cold outbound, I think, is one of the hardest ways to find customers and sign them up. But a lot of founders that we invest in, you know, the first thing that they ask us for after we invest is like, do you have any customer intros? Like, here's the kind of company that I'm trying to sign up. Do you know any? Can you make an introduction? Which is good, is helpful. Like, we're happy to do that. But it's kind of like training wheels. It's kind of like, okay, let's, you know, put the training wheels on, which are customer intros. So you can start riding the bike, and then eventually like we'll take the training wheels off. And the goal when you're building a company, the goal is not to like ride the bike as fast as possible with the training wheels on. The goal is to like get the training wheels off so that you can really start to cover some ground. You can be in control. You can be more maneuverable. You can go faster. And so the fact that Kushal was like, I'm going to not only sell the product before it's built, but I'm going to do it in the hardest way possible, which is by cold emailing people. I just thought was really cool. It was a really good way to start.
Yes. You skipped way further down the road. You find out a lot faster if the people really want this. That's the core, most important thing.
Yeah. Okay, now that was my serious recommendation. Now I'll move on to my fun recommendation, which is last weekend, we went to a friend's lake house, and they had a game there that I've never played before. I have a feeling this is the sort of thing that I've never heard of before, but I think maybe everybody else in the world has heard of. It's a game called KLASK. Have you heard of this game, Jake?
Oh, I haven't. I'm kind of into games. So can you show us oh, whoa. This is, so John's got a video up, and there's two people opposite. It's like a special board that's sort of got like a little wooden perimeter around it, and it stands up high off the table.
Yeah.
its own little platform, and inside the board, down below that little perimeter, it's blue. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, so it's like a tiny air hockey board, but without the air, right? Like it's just a board painted blue, and there's some different pieces that move around. It's a hockey, soccer, it's a goal. You have a stick, you
Okay.
can hit the ball into the goal. But there's a couple things that are really fun about this game. One is that there are these white dots in the middle. If you get 2 of the 3 white things stuck to your stick, you're out, or you lose a point. The other person gets a point. So you have to be somewhat controlled in the movements of your stick. But the other thing is that the way you control your stick is through the bottom of the board. If you look this up, or if you can see the screenshot right now, like you have a stick underneath, and there's a magnet from that stick, like through the play surface, through the board, so that they're magneted together. So you can move it around underneath, and it moves the stick at the top. But it's not perfect because it's a magnet and there's friction, and if it can come apart. So if you like move it too fast, you like lose control. And so anyway, it's really fun. It's one of those games where it's like, the fact that it's like hard and awkward, it like makes it more fun.
Right.
And anyway, I was playing it over the weekend, and I was like, this is a great game. So I thought I should look up some YouTube videos. And this is a YouTube video. It says the best KLASK game ever, ? An epic battle between 2 champions. And I'll just jump ahead to some gameplay. You can just see them playing. And
well, there's something pretty magical about seeing the board moving from the top because of the magnets. The participants' hands are underneath. It almost looks like a video game when you see it from up.
Totally. Yeah. And the other thing I loved about this is like, obviously these guys are like really, really good at playing this game, but like, it's still like clunky. It's still awkward. It's still clumsy. It's not like when you go from like you playing ping pong to like watching Olympic ping pong. Like these are the best players in the world. And like the stick still falls over, and like white things still get stuck to the stick. Anyway, if you're listening audio only, I apologize. This probably is not interesting, but anyway, KLASK, super fun game.
KLASK.
KLASK. I believe it is Danish. And also look up the YouTube videos.
Oh, that's great. Okay. I have a recommendation. This is a movie that I watched last night. Well, we always watch movies over 2 nights, so this is over the night before and last night.
Sorry to interrupt. How do you decide where to stop the movie?
Well, yeah, I think it's partly a factor of what time it is. So by the time we start a movie, it's like pretty close to when we want to go to bed. So then when you get into sort of the red zone where it's like, okay, we should probably go to bed soon, we say, okay, let's look for a good stopping place. So we were watching this last night with our 13-year-old son, our younger son. And so we're all then on the lookout for a stopping place. Okay. And it's usually, I think there was actually a book, and I'm blanking for the moment, where this phenomenon was explored in detail of like, if you're trying to stop watching Netflix or whatever, like a series, you should always stop like mid-episode rather than trying to stop at the end of an episode, because they always end the episodes with a cliffhanger. And the plot follows a typical sort of arc, and there's going to be lulls in the middle when it's a lot easier to break away.
Oh, interesting.
But in a movie, you also have intense parts and lulls. And so a good stopping place is a lull, right? So it's like a time when you feel less pull, it's less like painful to break away from it.
Yeah.
And some movies do not have good stopping places, or they're very intense, but we've kind of decided that we don't watch movies that we suspect will be like that in the evening. We try to, and so we rarely watch them, but it's more in the afternoon. Like Mission Impossible movie is going to be more of an afternoon.
No lulls.
No lulls. No good stopping places. This movie, although it did have a good stopping place, is a very, very fun, very compelling movie. And it is called The Eagle Huntress. I'm going to share my screen here and show you The Eagle Huntress. So here is The Eagle Huntress. And it's a documentary, and it is about the central character, I guess protagonist person in the documentary is this 13-year-old girl who, at the time of the filming, was in Mongolia. She's Kazakh, like Kazakhstan, like that's a people who live in different places too, and so they're nomadic, so they're kind of like they'll live one place for a while and then move like seasonally. And one of the things that they do is hunt with golden eagles. So they'll catch a golden eagle when it's young, and then both the hunter and the eagle, they sort of like train to work together to hunt.
Wow.
and they hunt for foxes and things like it. And it's traditionally been something that only men do, and she's like the first woman to do it.
Wow.
And it's so there's a lot of things that are really great about this, and you can see if you're looking on video, you can see that it's like winner of like all these awards. It's a great movie. Everyone agrees this is great, but the storyline is compelling. It's fun to see her breaking all these barriers. She has to like compete in a contest against all these older men, some of whom are kind of not so welcoming of a girl participating. She has to go hunting out in the 40 below or something. It's also beautiful. Like the landscape is just very stark, and the cinematography is gorgeous. So really, really cool movie. And I also thought, we watched this little special feature about the filming of it afterwards, and I thought there was a pretty interesting story there, because one of the things that's remarkable about this movie is you watch it, and I don't want to give away too much, but I don't think this is giving away too much, because she has an eagle. So very early on in the movie, she goes, her father takes her, and they've kind of like scouted out where there's these two young eagles, and they catch one.
Wow.
And so she has to like climb down this cliff face with her father like holding the rope at the top, and like get this eagle, which is still doing like the, like a baby bird kind of thing with the beak, where they're like, like opening their mouths to get food, because these eagles are so big when they're full grown. It's like half as tall as she, like it's big. It just physically seems very big.
Yeah.
And you'd think it would be scary. Like you're on the cliff face, eagle there waiting for like, is the mother eagle going to come back? And anyway, it's an amazing moment, and watching it and then seeing everything that unfolds from there. My thought was like, how did they know? How did the filmmakers know that this was going to be such a great story? And she's like the first person to do it. She's not like a person who did it. Like she's the first girl who did it. How did they have a sense of this, and how did they get there in time? And so anyway, I
always wonder about that with documentaries, like whether it's in a hard to access place like this, or whether it's just like following a sports team like through the season. Like, are you just sort of placing bets that like, some of them are going to pay off, or like, how do you know? Like, it's such a fascinating part of the process that I haven't heard very much about.
I thought it was actually sort of similar to thinking about startups and finding the right market opportunity, or if you're investing, finding the right startup to invest in. Basically, the filmmaker saw a photo of her with an eagle, so which would have been at the time like her father's eagle probably, and he was like, I bet that's a cool story. I'm going there right now. And he like grabbed like some of his gear, but not all, and went with like one other colleague of his. Let's see if we can track down those folks and find them. And they just like went to Mongolia, found them. They're interviewing like the father as well. And he's like, like we had them over, like they spent a day with us. We really kind of hit it off. And the father was like, I just kind of knew, I thought someone might come because I thought this was a great story. and so he like wasn't really surprised. Like he was like, yeah, of course you would want to film a documentary about this. It's awesome. And he's like, but the guy showed up basically the day that they were going to go get the eagle. So
crazy.
He just had to use the camera that he had. And he's like, yeah, I have a GoPro. So I put the GoPro on her so that you could see from her perspective.
That's cool.
And then I filmed as best I could from like some shots from up above with the dad, and then like went down below. But it's not the most beautifully filmed part of the movie, because he just had the stuff that was on him.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's I just thought that was a fun little detail, and fun movie. So
cool. The Eagle Huntress.
The Eagle Huntress.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's not new. I'm always a bit behind the times on stuff. This came out, I think, maybe in like 2016 or 17 or something like that. Cool. But it's good.
Well, somehow against the odds, we made it through another episode of Jake and Jay-Z. And if you're still listening, you did too. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, you can read, listen, and learn more at jakeandjz.com. Talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
This is Jake and Jay-Z. This is Jake and Jay-Z.